Hello, welcome to episode 86 of the Online Tennis Podcast. It's me, Jack, and I'm joined by Vansh once more. How you doing, Vansh?
Doing fantastic, Jack. Just a tremendous final, of course, to break down from the Miami Open.
Yep, we just watched Petra Kvitova beating Elena Rybakina 7-6, 6-2. That subtext, by the way, to the tiebreak 16-14. It was insanity. Really enjoyed it. Really, really great match. And a really interesting match up to talk about in general. A few stats for you first and foremost. Final number 41 for Petra Kvitova. In case you forgot, she was one of the greatest players in a lot of ways of all time. You know, she's Hall of Famer at least for sure. Joint second most WTA 1000 titles for active players now, courtesy of Vanch's tweet that he sent out earlier. Azarenka, by the way, with the most. 5 years after her last WTA 1000 title, she wins the Miami Open for the first time, becoming the second oldest champion to do so at the age of 33 years old. And she made a point to mention that actually in the post-match press conference. Obviously a lot of pride there, and justifiably so. Arguably one of the best finals players of all time. Kvitova is now 30-11 in tour event finals. I thought I'd look up Serena's record as well, just to put it into context. You're talking 74% win rate in finals for Serena and 73% for Kvitova. So she's, just within touching distance of that sort of record of basically the GOAT. It's insane. Hadn't made it past the quarters at either Indian Wells or Miami in her previous appearances. So she'd made 13 appearances in Miami and only gone as far as the quarters. And all of a sudden it's a quarter in Indian Wells, a win in Miami, making it 9 wins in the Sunshine Double. And she'd only previously got as much as 5 combined in any season. So out of nowhere, and I mean, it's a tournament she should have been doing well at. I was very surprised to hear she hadn't gone further than the quarters. But out of nowhere, Kvitova wins a tournament, and now she's back on the radar. How do we feel about that, Vanch?
Yeah, I mean, those are all really impressive stats, and she hasn't done well in Miami in the past. I think it's been a combination of the humidity and perhaps not coming with a lot of confidence from doing very well in Indian Wells. I mean, this year she had a pretty good result in Indian Wells, obviously beating Pagula along the way, and tremendous tiebreak actually there as well, third set tiebreak, and obviously the crazy match that you and I were also at when she played Ostapenko, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
no, she had her
Bagel,
chances
bagel.
against Sakari as well. She had her
Yeah,
chances against Sakari. I think had a couple break points to go up double break and was up a set in that one. But no, I think in general, I mean, if you look at her season so far, it's been fairly, pretty consistent. I think she knows that she's sort of at the back end of her career now, and she wants to absolutely maximize these opportunities. So a title at this age, I mean, and this was her first title since winning Madrid in 2018, a tournament she also does really well in. And obviously we know about that horrible knife attack she suffered 6 7 years ago, and she's still got that winning feeling. And there's times when I watch her play, she doesn't quite have the full feeling back on her dominant left hand as she's striking the ball, but I mean, she does it with the most conviction. And this week, I was very impressed by her serving. I think overall, and I think her ability to play front foot tennis, and she was able to rein it in when she had to. And yeah, she came up big in some clutch moments, and that's how you have to play when you're at the back end of your career, because you wanna go finish your career on a high, knowing that you've absolutely maximized. And 30 titles is ridiculous. I
yeah.
mean, in
I
the
know.
golden era that she was in, right, with Serena and
Yeah,
Azarenka, and I mean, you got Halep in there, you got so many. I mean, many people were writing her off. I think she was very close to retiring.
yeah,
So for her to pull this off is remarkable, and she's in the top 5 in the race
yeah,
and back in the top 10. And I
yeah.
think and I look if we just look further ahead into the season, she's had a lot of success in Stuttgart and Madrid, places like that. I'd be
And
very
Wimbledon,
worried if I was her
obviously.
opponent. And,
I
yeah,
mean,
and obviously
is it
two-time slam champion
Is it too early to
at
talk about
Wimbledon.
that, Vaj? Who knows? I was going to say, interesting point you made about the humidity there, because obviously historically she's had problems with that. You know, she sort of got tired in those
Yeah,
sort of conditions. You can't appreciate the amount of work she's doing at that age to overcome that sort of problem that she's had in the past. This
yeah,
tournament and being able to get through those conditions, winning 6 matches on the bounce, that's huge. That is huge. And there's obviously
yeah,
so much that's gone into that. That's the sort of stuff, the subtext to everything we're about to say, just recognizing the effort she's been putting in off the court to win this title. Insane. I just wanted to point that out. I wanted to first talk about the semi-final she had against Sorana Cirstea, who threatened, obviously, after knocking out Arina Sabalenka. Sabalenka having one of the most amazing serving performances against Krejcikova, and then coming into Cirstea and kind of 6-4, 6-4, getting a straight sets loss handed to her sort of out of nowhere. Cirstea returned really well, to be fair, and she did a good enough job there to make Sabalenka maybe feel pressure on the break points and stuff like that. But there had been work she'd done off the court. She was saying last year she had a shoulder injury. She had some time to sort of go off the court and work on her first serve, which always needed a bit of work. It's relatively poor given she's 5'9". She's fairly tall for somebody on the tour. She should have been doing better behind that serve. But you're talking about somebody who was delivering about 57% first serves, which is already relatively low, and winning about 63% of those serves. So you're talking about 36 points for every 100 service points you play. Now, the tour average is about 42 points for every 100 points you play. So it's very, very low considering. And in our match against Sabalenka, she was able to hold serve fairly well. But against Kvitova, that was where she got unstuck eventually, because she did a very good job of getting a lead. She was up 5-2, then up 5-3, serving 40-15. 2 set points. Sure enough, it was that problem that exposed her. 2 first serves, both returned by Kvitova with interest, and the return wasn't returned by Cirstea. So it was 2 unreturnable returns off of a first serve. And I mean, how many other players that are 5'9" on the tour are gonna deliver a first serve and it comes back at their toes and they lose the point 2 times in a row? It's unlikely, right, Vanch?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I also would credit Kvitova's deep returns this whole tournament because, I mean, they were just so fantastic, even in this match against Rybakina and her other matches that, this week as well, like against Vekic and Noskova and other opponents. I mean, if you don't hit your spot against Petra Kvitova, especially when she has a backhand return on the deuce side, you're totally toast because she's going to get that return deep. She's going to go really fast and hard down the middle. These courts are really fast in Miami, as we know, and she's going to push you behind the baseline. She did that over and over against Cirstea, and when Cirstea was serving for that first set, obviously she felt a ton of pressure, and she's had success against Kvitova before, and she knows that this is just like Kvitova's at the back end, she's sort of at the back end. They're both born in 1990, and that's I mean, when she couldn't hold in that service game, that pretty much changed the whole context of the match and just completely flipped. Right, all the momentum went Petra's way, and she's just never looked back. Really.
Yeah. A tiny little sidebar, because you're right, the focus should really be on Kvitova, and it was the fact her returns managed to get her back into the match. But tiny sidebar on the serve, she said she tried to improve the speed of the serve and ended up working on placement because they couldn't improve it. There's a fundamental technical deficiency in that shot
Yeah.
that I'm watching it. I'm like, is it not quite obvious? And I'll be interested to hear if you agree, Vanch. Is it not quite obvious that the manner in which she takes her back foot forward for the pinpoint serve, her 2 feet are in line, basically negating any power you're going to get from the hip below? You might be able to get a little bit of knee bend in there, but you're going to get no forward momentum from your hips, basically. It sounds like she can only hit it so hard, basically only using her arm motion.
I mean, you know how there's some players who have more of a kind of exaggerated knee bend,
Yeah.
and they kind of work around that issue a little bit more because like it's not quite a pinpoint and it's not quite a platform. But you're right, like Cirstea's is a very extreme pinpoint. Like it's, her feet are like almost so close together to the point where like her right foot is almost, I mean, her left foot is almost crossing over sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you said, and maybe like it's the mechanics of her toss. Sometimes she's going for too much slice. Sometimes her the ball toss can sort of fall wayward. It's a little bit like Anna Ivanovic-esque, I would say, but just a little bit, yeah. Like maybe it's not quite as high, and yeah, she's definitely, you can tell she's definitely like tinkered around with it because I remember seeing her like sort of in the early 2010s, and she had a pretty different type of service motion. Like you couldn't really, I mean, maybe fundamentally she's changed a few things around, and I think, I guess maybe now that she's working with Johansson, they've sort of cleared up other areas in her game and maybe been able to cover it up a bit better. But when you're playing Kvitova, any sort of a weakness like that is just going to get exposed, especially in this form.
Yeah. So yeah, with that said, you're quite right. With the work that's been done with Johansson, we might see her do something else. This could be not a flash in the pan. She's always been a great player in other departments. So you're right. We might see her somewhere else. But yeah, Kvitova managed to expose that. She did a great job to get to the final, where she played Elena Rybakina. Let's talk a little bit about that, because the matchup for me was always somewhat Petra favoured. And I've got 3 points for you, Vance, before I hear a little bit about what you think as well. So the first thing you got to think about is that dynamic cross court between the lefty forehand and the Rybakina backhand, right? So for me, Rybakina's backhand is great, particularly cross court. She's always had a lot of joy going cross court with a lot of pace to then open up the court for another shot, maybe down the line. That doesn't work against Kvitova because you're going into her forehand, which is a very strong flat shot, and it's a dynamic that feeds into a lot of other different things that I'm about to talk about. I mean, Rybakina has been using that all week, that backhand cross court, to earn her points, and against Kvitova it just didn't work at all. Anything that wasn't great would get laced down the line by Kvitova, and you're talking about a shot from Kvitova. She doesn't mind taking up high. She's a tall person as well, obviously, and if you get it low and flat and fast into Rybakina's forehand, you're going to get a lot of joy. Where that I would say her backhand's probably more stable than her forehand, even if she can get a little bit more power from her forehand. So if you can do that to Rybakina, you're going to get a lot of easy points without putting too much risk on the shot. So it's already a dynamic that's pro Kvitova. Further to this, though, in the second serve return, Rybakina's second serve isn't particularly varied for me. High kick and serve out wide, sits right in the Kvitova strike zone. She was able to do a lot from up there. We had that point at 4-all. I was going to get a little bit more specific later on, but we had a point at 4-all, break point, the first break of the match. Kvitova has a second serve return to work with. Sure enough, it wins her the point, and she gets a break that ends up being decisive, given that Rybakina eventually broke back in the next game. Last point, and I think it's the one you'll probably want to talk about the most, Vansh, is the fact that Petra on serve was untouchable against Rybakina. Now, we've been talking about how good Rybakina's returns have been, especially against Sabalenka in the Indian Wells final, where she was able to get a lot of those laced onto the baseline against Sabalenka and win points just by virtue of getting it so deep. Against Kvitova, that slider out wide, I was so impressed with Rybakina's backhand return in general against Sabalenka, but when it's moving away from her, when she's just on the stretch, it is such a different shot for her. It's not something she's as comfortable with. You have been talking about how well she defends, but against the first serve that's moving away from her, she just can't get that purchase that she got against Sabalenka. And most importantly, she can't keep it away from Petra's forehand, meaning all the aforementioned points about the lefty forehand to backhand, it just gets exacerbated as soon as that serve goes into play, especially in the ad court, which meant Kvitova was winning, I think, over 70% of her first serve and second serve points, right?
It was a crazy differential. I mean, Kvitova won 79% of her first serve points, 75% of her second serve points.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, I mean, compared to 48% for Rybakina. And I think that's, and a lot of that is the second set, sure, but even in the first set, the differential was quite big. And I think that what you're talking about, the leftiness, plays a big factor here because, I credited Rybakina's movement, but that's if you give her baseline rhythm, and she gets into sort of a tempo from the baseline, and then she can really use her movement and get back to neutral, and then step in. But I find her movement is better when she's moving side to side on the backhand and she's not playing a lefty, versus when she's playing Petra. Then her goal is like avoid the forehand at all costs, and there's no avoiding it because I mean if she goes cross, it better be really 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 good, and it's more of a flatter strike, and Petra is so comfortable just taking pace off of it and just going down the line hard. I mean, it doesn't look like she's even swinging that big because her ground, she's able to make her ground stroke compact and just use all of Rybakina's power, and just boom, it goes down the line. It doesn't even have to be very close to the line because that Rybakina has a lot of court to cover, and then she's having to really scramble corner to corner. And so whoever was going to do the least amount of scrambling in this match was going to come out on top. And if Petra's serving this well, I'm not sure there's anything Rybakina can really do because Petra's service location, unlike Rybakina, is quite varied. Like she'll sometimes go body, she'll sometimes go slice. She has a pretty good second serve to the point where she can hit it very close to her first serve in terms of average speeds, and and she'll get just the same amount of payoff. Like it's not like if she has to hit a second serve, like she's in trouble, But Rybakina, like she pretty much has an exclusively a kick serve to the righty backhand. That's kind of what's worked for her in the past, even in the Sabalenka matchup. And I felt like Rybakina felt like she had to do a lot more on the first serve, and she's not really a player who really will go out of her comfort zone that much, and particularly when it comes to her big serve and first forehand usually after the shot. But even the first backhand, it's pretty tough. I think.
Yeah, I was looking at Prime Video stats. They mentioned the following shot after any of Kvitova's serves was her forehand 3/4 of the times. You're talking about second serve returns as well. I'm sure the first shot after the first serve would have been even higher than that. It was just pro Kvitova in every way on serve. Despite all of that, we had a tiebreak that went 16-14, the longest, as you said, in WTA 1000
Yeah,
final history. A lot to think about there. Vanch, if you'll indulge me first, I'm going to talk about the 4 set points Kvitova saved and then hear your thoughts, because it was pretty much taking all of what I've just said, or what we've just said, into account and seeing those advantages playing out. 8-9 in the
yeah,
tiebreak, right? So that I think that might have been the first or second set point that Kvitova saved, but 8-9 probably being the most impressive. Kvitova has a huge second serve sliding out wide to force the error from Rybakina. Again, exactly what I was talking about. Just so difficult for Rybakina to do anything without exposing herself. So she had to go for more. She lost the point. Kvitova took on a bit of risk. By the way, Rybakina mentioned she was feeling a little. Kvitova, I should say, mentioned that she was feeling a little nervy at the start of the tiebreak. She said the balls were fluffy. She said she felt a bit nervy because she'd seen on social media Rybakina hadn't dropped a tiebreak all season. So it's funny. It's funny
yeah,
that sort of, that sort of effect. She knew she had to take on a bit of risk. So I don't know if we would have seen that second serve had people not been talking about Rybakina's tiebreak records so much on Twitter. It's quite interesting. Anyway, she took on the risk. She
right.
got away with it. 10-11. Rybakina's ripping multiple backhands cross court, the kind of dynamic she comes out on top of constantly, but it just keeps coming back because the forehand, Kvitova can absorb the forehand. She can keep it low. She can stop Rybakina from killing it down the line, and eventually Rybakina missed. So again, lefty to righty dynamic. 11-12. Kvitova jumps on Rybakina second serve with her forehand to force the backhand error. Again, exactly what we're
Yeah,
talking about. Up high, she was able to do enough of the return. And finally, 12-13, another huge slider out wide. Gets basically a forehand that's going to be put away every time. What do you think, Vanch?
yeah. I mean, those points do a pretty decent job of summing it up. Like, I think there was one other set point she might have had at 7-6, I want to say, but I think that was saved with a pretty big first serve, and it might have been actually down the tee. She really did a good job of like keeping Rybakina
Yeah.
guessing, because instead of going for the old faithful wide serve on the ad side every single time, and like is typical for most lefties, she could really she could go big down the tee and then just keep Rybakina completely guessing. And Rybakina, if she is able to get a good strike on the return, and get back to neutral, it can be dangerous because she's got such a good reach. She's 6'2", and she's pretty smooth at covering certain shots in the court that seem high percentage. But if Petra's able to get that serve, down the tee fast enough, hard enough, precise enough, nothing Rybakina can do. So I thought she did. I thought that came into play as well, and yeah, and the forehand to backhand dynamic was kind of a killer because Rybakina, like, she hits the ball pretty flat, and on the backhand especially, it's not like it's coming in with a lot of rotation. And this court really rewards sort of low, hard flat hitting, and Kvitova is so good at that. I think that's why I think also the court's being a little bit quicker this year, and in the combination of the balls. I think because Kvitova doesn't really kind of mind these Dunlop balls like other players that we may have seen in the past. And Rybakina has been playing with these all season, but I think just like the court being a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, it kind of aids her style of play a bit more than Miami in previous years. I think that definitely helped in some big moments.
A few other thoughts to just flesh out from the second set with some of those thoughts in mind there, Vanch. There was a few moments where I thought Rebecca maybe had a plan B, something to just sort of change up the dynamic. We had a point at 2-love, I believe, or it might have been
Yeah.
earlier. Anyway, yeah, one of the points in the second set where Rebecca finally changed up her return strategy and decided to chip a backhand return back instead of driving it back, ended up
Mm.
winning the point because instead of trying to find the backhand, she still went into the forehand. She just went with no pace and gave herself the opportunity to rip the next ball because Kvitova couldn't rip the chip return basically. We only saw it once. I don't know why we didn't see it again. She kind of went back to maybe it was a reactionary shot rather than a proactive shot. I would have liked to have seen something a
Yeah.
little bit more tactically diverse, something like that from Rybakina throughout the match. A shame because she did it once and it worked.
She did hit one. She did hit one very good running forehand down the line, I believe, to set up a break point,
Yes,
and that was at two love, right?
yeah,
That was two love, and Rubikina's. I mean, if she's able to get that break back, it did feel pretty high risk
yeah.
to do that over and over. The higher part of the net,
Yeah,
it's going to be
the
difficult.
break point was mad. That was like
Yeah.
at least ended with a Kvitova sort of cat and mouse. She won at the net basically. I think she
Yes.
only
Yes.
just
A very good reflex volley off the
yeah
backhand.
only just got it back into play, and then Rybakina kind of tried to outfox Kvitova with the sort of fake, and then Kvitova did the same thing back and kind of won the point. It
Yeah.
was superb actually. That really goes underrated. Please go watch that back if you've not seen it, listener. To love 30-40. Conversely to that, I'd like to just point out that Kvitova threw in the odd chipped ball during a rally to keep the ball low, and that's a great play against Rybakina. To the
Yeah.
forehand, at least, for sure. Like, that's the ropey shot. It's very difficult for Rybakina to generate pace when the ball sits low in the court. 3 love,
Yes.
30 all. She didn't get the break there, but she had threatened with a double break point. Barty has won both of her matches against Rybakina 3-2, and that's a huge reason for it. The slice is so
Yeah.
effective against Rybakina.
And same thing with Mukova and Indian Wells, right? I mean, even though she didn't go on and win, she had all the chances in the world to do it, and it was a slice. It's so effective
Yeah,
because 6'2", got to get down really low, generate all of that topspin, get it up high and over the net, and up and down for the spin. It's pretty tough, and we know she hits pretty flat, but she usually has a good amount of safety in a baseline rhythm exchange. So you want to take her out of that rhythm. It's a great play, and that's why Kvitova is so good on grass as
yeah,
well, because she can mix up that slice and it stays
yeah.
pretty low. It's a good one. She has one of the better slices. I find actually a lot of the lefties they generally have pretty decent slices. Like Fernandez is pretty good as well. Kerber, Kvitova has the same. I mean, I'm just really amazed by Kvitova's like the aggression that she played with. It didn't result in that many unforced errors. I mean, if I looked at the final stats, it was like 29-14, a plus 15 differential,
Jesus.
which is which is mad. I mean, you add that with how she was serving. I mean, 76% first serves in. Like, are you kidding me?
That's an
And
insane
she didn't
performance.
even.
That's really, really good.
Yeah, and she got broken once, but that was in the first set when she was serving it out. But I mean, it's crazy. And then the key for her, I think, was to get Rybakina under 50% on her second serve points one, and she managed to do that,
Yeah.
48%. So yeah, it was a through and through perfect performance. I think when you think about
Yeah,
it.
I couldn't agree more. Against one of the foreign players, obviously, we've been talking about the big four. We've been talking about Rybakina as the
Yeah.
second best hardcourt player on tour. Potentially the first now with some revisions, maybe, I don't know. And Kvitova dismantled her 7-6, 6-2. You don't get a better performance than that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And going into Wimbledon eventually, I mean, you've not got
Yeah.
Swiatek as a threat. I mean, I guess Rybakina turns into the favourite by a landslide in a lot of ways. But if Kvitova's a bad matchup for her, and we saw a repeat final, who knows? Big match player, 30-11 in finals. It could be incredibly exciting, Vansh.
Yeah, our Wimbledon results have been a little bit, up and down since 2014, of course, since winning it for the second time. But I mean, she won Eastbourne last year,
Yeah,
and when she gets hot like this, it's pretty tough to do it. It's not like it's just lightning in a bottle for one match. She's actually able to keep the momentum going and win these
yeah,
big
she's a pretty
titles.
streaky player.
So I don't really see why not, because there's still a lot of players kind of undercooked. I'm interested to see like kind of what Mukova could do on the
Yeah,
grass. Maybe a player like yeah, like all those flatter hitters that we now have, like a Samsonova and power
yeah.
baseliners. I'm interested to see kind of how that goes. But she's as big of a favorite as you can make her, because like if you're just like going by odds or something like that, I think she'd be pretty high on the list.
Right, Vanch, I'll close up shop there. Keep us under half an hour. I think we've said all we need to say about the tournament. It was absolutely fantastic. So good to see a vet like that winning. Even if in my head I'm
Yeah.
like, if Kvitova can win, probably Andy can win, and it's got nothing to do with that. I'm keen to see somebody like Kvitova winning for sure. Absolutely fantastic story. Vanch, thank you for joining me for what I believe is the third week in a row. Thank you very much, as always.
Honored, Jack, honored.
Hope you enjoyed it. Please catch Vansh's work at VanshV2K on Twitter. Same for me at ontheline_Jack. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe, the usual. Thank you very much for joining us at the Online Tennis Podcast. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.